So hello everyone, I'm Fiona Brocklehurst. I'm here to talk to you about eco-design and energy labelling measures for consumer appliances. I'm using eco-design here as a shorthand for the full title, which is the Eco-Design of Energy-Related Products Directive, which is a bit of a mouthful, so I hope you'll allow me to do that. So what I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to give an introduction to these two directives that we're talking about. For each product, I'll talk about the history of the regulation to date and the current situation. And for some of them, I'll give a little bit more, expand a little bit more on some learning points maybe, and the effect of the regulations so far. I'll wrap up with to give an impression of the energy savings from some of these regulations, and also on some of these regulations are currently being reviewed and what's happening with that. So just to say that you may think, oh, well, there must be more information on eco-design and energy labelling already. There isn't at the moment, but there will be soon. There's a plan to do one on eco-design in October, and there is going to be one on energy labelling and Energy Star. Also relevant is a webinar that is already available. One of the low carbon economy webinars was on energy efficient domestic appliances. And that gives some good context in terms of the energy usage of the different products and what good products are available. It's less policy focused than the webinar today. So if you'd like a bit more background, that might be worth looking at. Just before we get into this, particularly when I'm giving information on the individual product regulations, there's a lot of material, so I'm not necessarily going to talk in any detail about them, but I wanted to present the information so you've got them as a reference. So moving on to the two regulations, the two framework directives we're talking about energy labelling and Ecodesign, which is the latest form of MEPS, which are minimum energy performance standards. So you can see here that energy labelling has quite a long history in the EU. It took a while to get going from when it was first discussed to when it was first implemented. You can see a small picture of the original label on the right. It's on energy efficiency classification, and it's rated from A to G. Where A is the highest performance, the highest efficiency, and is in green, and G is the lowest in red. So that's 7-point scale. The initial minimum MEPS, as they're shorthand called, started back in 1992, and there were a few regulations that were individual products. In 2005, we moved to the Ecodesign Directive, which set a framework for then having regulations on individual products. So that made that it was more efficient and also provided a way for deciding which products should be regulated. Those are the working plans, which we already have had a webinar on, and also how to regulate, what process to go through in order to decide what the regulation should be. That directive, as you can see, has been updated from energy using in 2005 to energy related in 2009. So it's also, as well as having this sort of overarching framework, the other change between MEPS and the previous MEPS and Ecodesign is it looks more broadly. It looks at the whole life cycle, not just the in-use phase, and it looks at other environmental impacts such as water use, waste, and so on. Coming back to the labelling, so this slide takes the history up to 1995 and the first implementations. A number of different products were then regulated, which will be coming, some of which we'll be describing in the rest of this course. But the other thing that happened was that the Energy Labelling Directive also got recast in 2010. So the old label, the original label on which is on the right, had two parts to it. It had the color and graphic aspect, and it then had some text, which was then in the individual language of the member state. And the retailer or the manufacturer had to put those two bits together when they were attaching it to the product. It was decided that that was quite complicated and sometimes caused issues. So the new label, which is on the left, you can see is using almost no words. It's using graphics as much as possible to be as language independent as possible. But the layout is basically very similar. You still got the 7-point scale. You still got the same bits of information. Say for fridges, you've still got the amount of energy used per year. So just to give a little bit of context, these two energy regulations work very much hand in hand, and that's illustrated by this graph. So we have efficiency on the x-axis going to the left, so the more efficient to the left, and sales to the top. So you'd start off with a typical normal distribution, the red line, and if you apply minimum standards, you cut off the worst performing products, so you get the blue curve, and the green curve is saying it then pulls the market, encourages the best performing products, the highest efficiency products, and they transforms together. They can very effectively transform a market if used correctly. However, these are not the only policies that are available in the EU for these sorts of policies. There are a whole range. I'm not going to talk through all of these. You'll be glad to hear. Two I want to pick out is the energy label I'm talking about is a mandatory label. There are two voluntary endorsement labels which are available for products. One of them is in the middle there, Energy Star, which applies to office equipment, and the yellow oval is the Eco label, which is also covers a whole range of impacts. Again, not just energy. Of the products I'm talking about today, only TV has an Eco label. So going a little bit, not in any detail, into how these regulations are derived. Here's an overview of the process. The things I'd like, well, one thing to say is that this is called the Ecodesign process, but it is in fact the same process for energy labeling. The decision on the information gathering and analysis is done in the Ecodesign preparatory study for both labels and Ecodesign, and the same process for agreeing the regulations is there too. The main thing I want to point out for this slide today is that there is quite a lot of stakeholder consultation, if you see at the bottom with the preparatory study, with industry and other members, and then the Consultation Forum, which is a formal body, includes member state representatives, but also trade associations and NGOs. So this is a consultative process. It's also quite a slow process, well, quite a long process perhaps, that's a better way of putting it, with typically taking 51 to 52 months. So it takes a while for all of this to happen. Just to give an idea, all these products, how products are selected for Ecodesign and energy labeling. And so they need to be a mass traded product. The indicative value is 200,000 units a year. They have to have significant environmental impact and potential to improve that. And then additionally for energy labeling, you would only label a product if there is a range of performance in the market. If there isn't much variation, then there isn't any point. You're not going to provide extra information. And generally speaking, they're products that are consumer products. They're not ones that people who are buying these items day in, day out. So it's not professional purchases. So you're providing a sort of shortcut information source for people who aren't very familiar with buying these items. So I think it's fairly clear that the kind of products we're talking about today comfortably meet those requirements. And just in terms of logistics, as it were, mostly Ecodesign and energy labeling is shared between DG Energy and DG Growth. But DG Energy most of the products that have been energy labelled have been the responsibility of DG Energy. And before we get on to the individual products, there is a metric that's used for not all but most of the labelled products and also used in some of the Ecodesign regulations, which is the EEI, the Energy Efficiency Index. And this expresses the performance as a ratio of a product over a reference product, which means the higher the EEI, the less efficient, the lower the EEI, the more efficient. So that's maybe slightly counterintuitive from the name, but that is how it is. And just to make that a bit more concrete and hopefully easier to understand, I've given an example here. This is the simplest one of the products we've looked at I could find. So you can see that basic formula of the product you're interested in labeling, the P-power, and then the reference value. And the reference value is composed of two parts for TVs. It's the basic aspect and then the area with a variable. So the bigger the TV, obviously that value goes up. But there is a sort of core overhead value, this P basic, which is set by the functionality of the TV. So it's lowest for what's called a display, so that doesn't convert a signal into a TV signal into something it can show. It just has to have the right signal, sorry, I can't think of another word, put into it, to where you've got a more complicated set, where you've got not only a receiver but two receivers and say a hard disk for recording TV programs, then you've got a higher allowance. So it's this combination of the basic allowance and the value that varies with area. And the other EEI calculations are similar to this, but generally with more complications and variations. I'll leave you to discover those for yourself. So what are we talking about today? These are many of the products that have been regulated that are in our homes. There are a few I haven't tried to cover today. I've left off heating and air conditioning, which are quite distinct from these kinds of products. And on the whole, the regulations are more complex and I think need considering separately. And then secondly, we have ICT and some of the consumer electronic products. Now, with ICT, there's an overlap with commercial use or industrial use, and also with consumer electronics, there are a number of voluntary agreements which are a bit different, so it seemed appropriate to cover them separately. The order of these products, if you're wondering, is the order that they were first regulated under Ecodesign. So in order to come up with an order, that's the one I chose. So let's start with fridges and freezers. Fridges and freezers are often the first products that people look at when they're looking for regulating products for energy. For some very good reasons, they are always on. They have quite a high use, and in countries, developed countries, they have a very high penetration level, by which I mean most households have at least one, and quite often two or even three. So they are a big contributor to domestic energy use. You can see that there's been the combination here of 1995 was the label, 1999 was the first MEPS. As time went on, the performance of some of the products kept improving, and it wasn't they were all in the A class of the label. It was called A saturation. So this label wasn't doing its job. It wasn't showing the better performing products and providing a market incentive to produce the better performance products. So in 2004, it was decided to add the A and the A++ classes. And as a result, we have, when the use stuck with having 7 classes, so the bottom 2 classes, F and G, were taken off the label. In 2010, we have the Ecodesign coming in and removing the least efficient, and then again in 2012 and 2014. So this is the EEI for the current label. You're going from A++ to D, and that's applied since 2012. So we've had this long history of regulation, and the refrigerators and freezers are currently under review. So I found this piece of work that's recently been done using GfK, that's market data by the top 10 group, looking at 3 product groups and seeing this is the distribution of the market by the different label grades from 24 to 2014. Incidentally, there are some earlier reviews of particularly cold and the impact that the label regulations had, but this is bang up to date, so I thought it was interesting. And it makes for a very pretty graph, and it's quite an impressive picture in that from 2004, over 10 years, the average efficiency index has improved by 34%. And you can see the introduction of the A++ and that sort of taking market, a chunk of market share. Given that the Ecodesign effect only came in 2010, you can see that most of this impact has come from the energy label rather than Ecodesign. So that's the picture if you're looking at efficiency. This is the graph showing energy consumption. It's got it for three different countries, but I'd like to concentrate on the EU as a whole, which is the grey bars. And it does show a reduction. Over that 10-year period, it's dropped 25%. So that's still substantial, but not as good as the efficiency. The reason for that is that on average, the size of fridges and freezers has grown. So while the efficiency has increased, we've lost some of those energy savings by the fact that we've got bigger products. This report also has information on washing machines and tumble dryers, but I'm not going to present them today for reasons of time. The report's publicly available, so if you're interested, have a look. So moving on to our second product, simple, sorry, I should have spelled that in full tonight, set-top box. So this is the box that when digital broadcasting was introduced, sat between your conventional TV and the aerial to convert the signal to a digital, conventional signal for your TV. So the regulation in 2009, 2010, with 2 tiers in 2010 and 2012. There wasn't a label. It wasn't an area where there was much range of performance, so it wasn't felt that that was appropriate. As you can see, it's quite an old regulation, and it has been reviewed, and the conclusion was that it's not a priority to be revised. On the whole, the digital switchover in most countries is complete now, and people are buying TVs that don't need a set-top box anymore, and also that the energy saving potential is modest. So in those combination of things, it's not worth thought to revise it. Moving on to televisions attached to your set-top boxes. So the Ecodesign was adopted in 2009 with 2 tiers in 2010 and 2012. We have the energy label introduced as well, which started off with the A to G. The current version is A++ to, well, I've given the A++ to D because those only, the values, the classes below that actually aren't available anymore because of the regulation. So it was decided with this label to, from the start, give the possibility or give a timetable for the label changing such that you would add the extra higher efficiency classes. So those show the ones over the different dates. To add an extra sort of incentive for manufacturers to produce the more efficient models, these dates show when they must be used, but manufacturers can choose to use the most ambitious label with the A++ at any point. So you could see at any one time in a shop all three of those labels. Now here's another product that's been in the process of review, and again top 10 have chosen to use market data to have a look at what happened to TVs. So this shows the average power, on-mode power, so I'm looking at the energy use over a period or the efficiency. This is the power, but for a specific size of TV. So there's some element of efficiency here. It's looking at the same class of TVs. And you can see that the average TV was substantially below the Ecodesign requirements when they were introduced, both the first tier in 2010 and the second tier in 2012. Top 10 have also provided data for the larger TV size. This is the 32-inch at that point was the average TV size, and the differences between the regulations and the average performance are even bigger. So it very much seems as though those regulations, well, either those regulations were anticipated by the manufacturers, or and they responded very quickly, or the regulation hasn't necessarily had any much response. And the top 10 report provides information on this regulation came at a point when the market was switching. It was switching from the CRT big tube TVs to the flat screens initially, and then from within the flat screens, from the LCD TVs that were backlit with fluorescent lamps, CFLs, to those switched with LEDs. And it's the top 10 report shows with the market data that it was that switch in technology that has had this transforming effect on the market, not the regulation. So it just illustrates that it's very, with some products, particularly the consumer products, which can evolve very quickly, that it can be difficult to come up with effective regulation. Again, given that the regulations themselves take quite a long time to develop. So you're having to try and anticipate what's coming, and that makes life difficult for policymakers. Okay, moving on to washing machines. So this was first labelled quite a long time ago. It moved to 2011 to the A++ label with, we've got 2 tiers of Ecodesign, both of which have come in. Something worth noting perhaps is that it includes water consumption restrictions as well as just energy. These are the EEIs. Just to note that the calculation for the EEI takes into account usage of 2 different part load and full load of the washing machine, and at 2 different program cycles. So it's trying to simulate what actually happens in someone's home. The label also has the energy consumption, the water consumption, the capacity of the machine, the spin drying efficiency, and the noise emissions. So it's trying to give consumers a good picture of what you get when you buy this machine. Dishwashers, quite a similar story really. Quite a long time for labels before the Ecodesign Directive came in. There are 2 sizes. Well, the regulations apply to 2 sizes of dishwashers, the regular size and the compact, which has 10 or more place settings or is less than 45 centimeters wide. And here are the label classes again. And again, that is assuming a certain number of cycles per year. So the value of annual energy use on the label is based on 280 standard cycles. And then the label shows the energy and the water and the capacity and the drying efficiency and the noise emissions. So quite similar to the washing machines. Moving on to tumble dryers, again been labelled for a long time. Had 2 tiers of Ecodesign, the second of which isn't coming in until November of this year. Again, you have two technical types of, well, not again. You have two technical types of tumble dryers, which are vented and condensation. They have a different, slightly different calculation and allowances for EEI. The energy label has the, again, annual energy use assuming 160 drying cycles. It shows the capacity, the cycle time for a particular load where you've got full cotton, and the sound emission, so you can tell how noisy it is. Moving on to vacuum cleaners. So this is quite an interesting one. It wasn't one that was labelled a domestic product that was labelled under the old directives. So it was newly regulated under Ecodesign Energy Label this time round, taking effect in 2014. We weren't by any means the first economy to regulate vacuum cleaners. Brazil, China, Iran and Korea all have done that, either with a energy performance or an energy label. But it was quite novel in some respects. For one thing, this is like the set-top box. There was set an absolute limit on the energy use, and there was also, which is the max rated input power. And rather than efficiency, the annual energy is the metric that's used on the label and in the Ecodesign. So that's a bit different to most of the other products. It also set, as you can see, some requirements for how effective the vacuum cleaners are on two different surfaces, on carpet and hard floor. And those get more stringent as we move from the ones that are effective at the moment to what comes in September in a couple of years. And then that future one also covers dust re-emissions, so dust coming out of the cleaner, and the sound level to make them less noisy. So those are the current classes, and the important thing to note is it's annual energy consumption, not EEI on the label. So it's in kilowatt hours per year. That assumes 50 cleaning tasks per year, of which half are on hard floor and half are on carpet, with a certain area that is to be cleaned each time, and with 4 strokes per area. So it's all quite defined, quite well defined. I thought I would give you a picture of the vacuum cleaner label because I think it's quite cute, but more importantly, it illustrates the issue of how to address, how to provide information to people without using words. So the graphic, this particular one is for a vacuum cleaner that works on both carpet and hard floor. So the idea is that the carpet is on the left, the hard floor is on the right, and then you have the HG on the left is for its cleaning efficiency on the carpet, and the HG on the right is for its cleaning efficiency on the hard floor. Hopefully the sound level and the decibels is reasonably straightforward. And then the HG above with the little puff of dust is for the dust re-emission. So it's trying to get quite a lot of information in a way on that label without using words. And then at the top you've got the usual HG label, and then you've got the corresponding kilowatt hours per annum value, which is what the label is on. So this being the first notable, I don't know, label that and Ecodesign that set a limit on power, though that had happened previously for the set-top boxes, this got quite a strong reaction in the UK in particular from the press and the media. So this is the headline from the Daily Mail, which is one of the tabloid newspapers, very popular. they have an agenda, the Daily Mail and quite a lot of the media in the UK, which is anti-EU. The European Commission are automatically the bad guys in any situation. So if they get a story that they can put put a headline on that meets that agenda, then they will seize the opportunity. What was slightly more upsetting for those of us who work in this area was that the basis of that was a press release by Which, who are the main consumer organisation in the UK. So here is their headline. So they start off with focusing on the 1600 watts, the fact that you won't be able to get the most powerful. So the highlighted text in the middle there, you should act quickly before the models currently sell out. So that's their lead. They then, in the next sentence, admit that motor size is not the most important thing, and that the efficiency, that you can get a really good cleaner without that high power. But because of the headline, that got the press reaction that we've just seen from the Daily Mail. So that was, kind of irritating. But there we are. Which, just out of interest, has gone back and tested a lot of machines fairly recently, back in January this year. They weren't very happy with the performance values that were on the label. They tried to replicate them and found that they couldn't really, basically. But they did concede that the energy label was a useful thing, and the tests they did showed that the products were correctly labeled. So from that point of view, it was working. We're in the last product group, you may be glad to hear. The oven, hobs, and range hoods were all regulated together, but there's a lot of information, so I split them out into ovens and hobs and range hoods separately for this. So ovens, electric ovens all ovens have been labelled since for quite a long time, initially with the HG. That was switched to the A++ to D when the new regulations came in January this year. They set, we have the EEI for the oven. The energy consumptions, I think I'd just like to explain those a little bit. It's called energy consumption for the hob. In fact, it isn't. It is an efficiency in that it is the watt hours, the energy used per kilogram of water heated to get that value. The energy efficiency of the gas hob is the energy used over the theoretical energy required to heat that water. Again, it's water. So we've got one tier that has taken effect. We've got another two coming in January and 2016 and 2019. Slightly unusually, the Ecodesign regulation limits aren't lined up with the EEIs on the label. The gas and the hobs aren't labelled, but the ovens are, and there are the classes. So that's what we've got. So the regulation values, like I say, fall between classes on the energy label. The energy use that's shown on the label for gas ovens is in megajoules, not kilowatt hours. The label also shows the capacity of the cavity and the energy consumption per cycle. Moving on to range hoods, I'm not sure. I'm just going to describe what a range hood is. It's the thing that sits over the hob or your cooker that extracts the air away, so it takes away the condensation and the smells, and also quite often has a light. So I hope that describes it adequately. We've got the same timing for the regulations coming in. Again, we have an EEI for the range hood. We've also got a fluid dynamic efficiency, which has got to increase going through time. and there are the label classes. The label also includes the annual energy consumption, given a certain number of usage, the fluid dynamic efficiency class, which is part of the regulated thing, but also has the lighting efficiency class, the grease filtering efficiency class, and the noise value. And again, we had with ranges, we have a series, rather like TVs, we've got a series of labels going from A+ to F to A++ to E to A++ to D in January 2010. So to try and provide an incentive to avoid the saturation in a class that I talked about earlier, and to try to provide an incentive for people to manufacture and sell the more efficient products. So that concludes my review of what's going on with those particular products. I thought it would be helpful just to give a bit of context to look at how much energy those measures are projected to save. In each regulation, there was an impact assessment which made these projections. Rather than looking at all of those, there was a study done for the Commission by VHK, which is what the data I'm using, which took a common approach to all of them and pulled all the data together. But this is not using market data that's happened since the regulation, so it's using the data that was in the original regulation. And it would be quite interesting to see, how accurate those are. But it does give you a picture. So we've got savings increasing, certainly out to 2040 from today. It shows that even though fridges and freezers have been regulated for a long time, the most recent regulations are still providing huge amounts of savings, about roughly half at every year period we're looking at here. I should just point out that the energy savings here are primary energy. So that's with electricity, that's being converted, taking into account the average efficiency of generating the electricity from coal or gas or whatever primary energy has been used. But even taking that to account, that's a pretty substantial amount of energy. Sort of in 2020, that's over 325 terawatt hours a year. So it's quite an impressive picture. But as I said earlier, there are reviews ongoing. There is considered to be scope for more regulation and further savings to be had. TVs has already happened, and the regulation has been drafted and is sort of in process. That was together with computer displays. There are studies underway looking at washing machines and washer dryers that washer dryers haven't been regulated to date. Dishwashers and refrigerators and freezers. So those are happening at the moment. It's built into the regulation as a review date to say this is what's happening. This is when we need to look and see whether there's scope for doing any more, or not just in terms of increasing the energy requirements, but seeing if any of the exemptions that have been in there are being misused, if there's been any unintended consequences from the regulations as they were originally drafted. So that's that. There are lots of places to look for more information on the Ecodesign Directive and energy labelling. The two parent, as it were, DGs are obviously good places to go. The ECEEE website is good. If you're interested in the labels in particular, CSED, the Trade Association for White Goods, has an excellent site which has got information for each member state separately that show you exactly which label you should use at the moment and what information they have on them. So if you want more information on that, that's the place to go. Finally, I just wanted to throw open that there's a lot of other aspects to ecodesign and energy labelling. If you look outside of the EU, these are all aspects of how do we compare the EU with various other places. I meant to say as well as the individual regulations that are being reviewed. There's a minor review of Ecodesign Directive and a major review of the Energy Labelling Directive, which is very close to completion. We are expecting the proposals from the European Commission on those next week, and that includes the label design. So whether to keep on with the A++ as things keep improving, or whether to change back to HG and change the value, the EEI, that corresponds to what an A was, which so far have been stable over how we've used them. So part of that process, some of these other reports have been done. I just thought they might be of interest to this audience. They're looking at how things compare. All right, that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much. Any questions, let me know.